Hey everyone, welcome to Mythology Explained. In today's video, we're going to discuss the three daughters of Zeus, whose power, influence, and terrifying potential made them some of the most formidable beings in all of Greek mythology. I've already done a video on his three most powerful sons, so watch that one next if you haven't already. Though Zeus fathered countless children, not all of them were merely princes and princesses of Olympus, figures of luxury basking in divine privilege. Some were forces unto themselves, beings whose presence could alter wars, break minds, or make even immortals tread carefully. And unlike many of Zeus's sons, whose greatness was often measured in physical might, conquest, or heroic feats, these daughters wielded something subtler, and in many ways more dangerous: wisdom, strategy, dominion, and supernatural influence over the deepest parts of mortal and divine life. First, we're going to go over how power worked differently among the daughters of Zeus, and then we're going to examine the three who stood above the rest: Athena, Artemis, and Persephone. In Greek mythology, raw strength was only one kind of power. Ares could dominate a battlefield, Heracles could strangle monsters, and thunder itself belonged to Zeus. But the myths make clear that authority didn't rest on muscle alone. Some gods ruled through intellect, some through fear, some through mystery, and some through the simple fact that no one dared oppose them. And this is where several of Zeus's daughters become especially interesting. They weren't secondary figures orbiting greater male gods. They were often central pillars of the cosmic order itself. Their domains touched war, kingship, nature, death, fertility, law, and civilization. Remove them, and the world itself begins to come apart. The first is Athena. Athena was the goddess of wisdom, strategy, craftsmanship, and disciplined war. And unlike Ares, who represented the chaos and bloodlust of battle, Athena embodied the kind of intelligence that wins wars before they begin. She was calculation over rage, precision over frenzy, and victory through superior thought rather than brute force. Her birth alone marked her as extraordinary. Zeus, having swallowed Metis, later suffered a tremendous pain in his head. When it was split open, Athena emerged fully grown, armored and battle-ready. She didn't enter the world as an infant dependent on others. She arrived complete. And this matters because in mythology, birth stories often symbolize nature. Athena springing from the head of Zeus is power born from mind itself, and her influence was immense. Heroes constantly relied upon her guidance. Odysseus, perhaps the most cunning of Greek heroes, survives in no small part because Athena favors him. Perseus receives divine aid. Cities place themselves under her protection, and Athens, one of the most important cities in the Greek world, literally bears her name. In the Odyssey, Athena is repeatedly introduced with one of Homer's most famous epithets. Then the goddess, grey-eyed Athena, answered him, "Take courage now, and set these things within your heart. I will not leave you in your troubles." Even in translation, the tone is unmistakable. Athena is not simply a deity of battle. She's calm, intelligence, reassurance in crisis, and guidance in moments where strength alone isn't enough. But Homer goes further still, presenting her not merely as comforting, but as actively directing human destiny. "I myself will devise this plan for you, so that you may come home to your native land." Athena's greatest weapon isn't the spear, but foresight. She sees paths others cannot see and turns survival itself into an art. And in the Iliad, her role becomes even clearer. She doesn't merely inspire courage, she shapes outcomes. Warriors don't simply fight harder when Athena is present, they fight smarter. And when Diomedes enters battle under her favor, Homer writes, "Pallas Athena kindled in him tireless fire, in his heart and in his eyes." It's one of the clearest depictions of divine empowerment in Greek myth. Even Zeus, king of the gods, is frequently depicted not as threatened by Athena, but as relying upon her counsel. That alone says a great deal. In a pantheon filled with vanity, rebellion, and rivalry, Athena occupies a place of unusual trust, even with Zeus. The second is Artemis. Artemis was goddess of the hunt, wilderness, wild animals, the moon in later tradition, and protector of maidens and childbirth. At first glance, that may sound gentler than the domains of war or kingship, but it wasn't. Artemis was one of the most feared deities in Greek mythology. She represented the untamed world beyond walls and roads. the forests, mountains, beasts, and lonely places where civilization no longer ruled, and to offend Artemis was to provoke something primal. And myths repeatedly show how dangerous that could be. Actaeon glimpses her bathing and is transformed into a stag, torn apart by his own hounds. Niobe boasts herself greater than Leto, mother of Artemis and Apollo, and watches her children struck down. Agamemnon offends her and finds an entire Greek fleet stranded until appeasement is made. And in the Iliad, Homer gives Artemis a title both simple and revealing. Artemis of the Golden Throne, Lady of Wild Beasts, who delights in arrows. It's difficult to summarize her more effectively than that. Artemis isn't merely a huntress armed with a bow. She is sovereign over the untamed world itself, a goddess of beauty, danger, and lethal precision. Elsewhere, her speed and lethal grace are emphasized through comparison to the hunt itself, as when Artemis delights herself with arrows upon the mountains, hunting boars and swift deer. The imagery is telling. Artemis is most herself not in palace halls, but in forests and on high slopes where mortal law has no reach. Her myths repeatedly remind audiences that nature, purity, and sacred boundaries weren't things to be violated casually. She punishes arrogance, violation, and disrespect. She's a reminder that nature doesn't negotiate with human pride. And what makes Artemis especially formidable is her independence. Unlike many divine figures whose stories revolve around marriage or political alliances, Artemis remains fiercely self-governed. She answers to no husbands, submits to no romantic narrative, and roams where she wills with bow in hand. Even among gods, that autonomy is rare. The third is Persephone. Persephone is often remembered only as the abducted maiden carried to the underworld by Hades, but that is merely the beginning of her story, not the end, because eventually she becomes Queen of the Dead, and that title carries immense weight. The underworld was not a minor province. It was a destination of nearly every mortal soul. Kings, warriors, poets, tyrants, and peasants alike eventually entered that realm, and to rule there was to govern one of the most universal realities in existence itself, death. Even gods treated the underworld with caution. It was ancient, solemn, and not easily defied. Persephone, seated beside Hades, becomes part of that authority. She's no longer simply Zeus's daughter. She's sovereign in her own right. She also embodies one of mythology's deepest dualities, life and death intertwined. Through her cyclical return to her mother Demeter, the earth blooms again, and through her descent, winter returns. In this sense, Persephone isn't tied just to the dead below, but to the living world above. Seasons themselves move through her story. In the Homeric hymn to Demeter, when Persephone rises again, the world itself responds. Then all the wide earth, with leaves and flowers, was laden, and to rich fields blossom, joy came to bright-crowned Demeter. This is one of the most striking images in Greek religion. Persephone's return isn't merely emotional reunion. It's fertility restored, famine ended, and life itself returning to creation. But the hymn also emphasizes the terror of her absence, when Demeter wanders in grief and the earth yields nothing. The earth would not send up seed, nor would the fields grow again, for fair garland Demeter kept it hidden. That line reveals Persephone's true scale. Her story isn't confined to one family tragedy. It governs whether civilizations eat or starve. And yet she is also queen below, enthroned among the dead. When Odysseus enters the underworld, even heroes fear the powers that dwell there. Persephone's realm is the final destination of kings and beggars alike, and that dual authority, life above, death below, makes her one of the most profound divine figures in the Greek imagination. So, which daughter of Zeus was the most powerful? That depends entirely on what you mean by power. If power is intellect, strategy, and civilizational influence, Athena has a near unmatched claim. If power is primal fear, divine punishment, and untouchable independence, Artemis stands towering and severe. And if power is sovereignty over death and the cycle of life itself, Persephone may be the most profound of all. Hesiod's Theogony describes Zeus as the god who rules over mortals and immortals, highest of all the gods, whose thunder is mighty. And yet that is precisely what makes these daughters so interesting. They don't need to replace Zeus in order to matter. Each governs a realm even thunder cannot simply erase. Hesiod also reminds us that divine order is hierarchy, inheritance, and domain. Zeus reigns above all, but rule in Greek myth is always shared, distributed, and specialized. And that may be the real lesson here. Greek mythology doesn't present power as one thing. It appears in many forms: wisdom, force, mystery, law, nature, death, beauty, fate. Zeus may have ruled the heavens, but among his daughters were beings who ruled realms no thunderbolt could fully command. And that's it for today's video. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Until next time, remember, in Greek myth, some forces do not sit on a throne. They shape the world itself.